Late at night in a deserted park, a young homeless man sits alone, trembling from hunger and despair, when suddenly an elderly woman appears, clinging tightly to him and crying, calling him by a name he has never heard before. Moments later, the old woman collapses, her body icy cold. Panicked, the young man uses his only jacket to cover her and with the last of his strength carries her to the hospital. He has no idea that the old woman is the mother of a billionaire and that after this night, his life will change forever. Before we dive into the full story, tell me where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more stories of kindness every day. The cold had stopped hurting about an hour ago. That was the dangerous part. Caleb knew. When you stopped feeling the cold, when the shivering slowed down and your thoughts got fuzzy, that meant your body was shutting down. That meant you were running out of time. He'd been sitting on this park bench since sunset, watching the snow fall through the amber glow of the street lamps. 21 years old, and this was where life had brought him. No family, no home, no money for a shelter bed tonight. Just this bench, this thin jacket, and the stubborn determination to survive until morning. His stomach had given up growling hours ago. Now it was just a hollow ache, a constant reminder that he hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, when he'd found half a sandwich in a trash can outside a coffee shop. He'd learned not to be proud about things like that. Pride was a luxury for people who had options. Caleb kept his head down, his hood pulled up. Eye contact was dangerous when you were homeless. It invited questions from concerned citizens who'd call the cops, or worse, from other people on the streets who saw you as competition for resources. Better to stay invisible, stay quiet, stay alive. He didn't notice her at first, didn't hear her shuffling footsteps or see her thin figure emerging from the darkness beyond the lamplight. It wasn't until she spoke that he realized he wasn't alone anymore. Daniel? The voice was elderly, trembling with cold and something else. Confusion, maybe. Fear. Caleb looked up and saw her. An old white woman, maybe 70 or 75, standing a few feet away in nothing but a thin cardigan and slacks. No coat, no hat, no gloves. Her white hair was dusted with snow, and her face was wet with tears that were freezing on her cheeks. "Daniel, is that you?" Before Caleb could answer, before he could even process what was happening, she rushed forward and threw her arms around him. Her embrace was desperate, her whole body shaking as she sobbed into his shoulder. "Oh Daniel, I found you, I found you, thank God I found you." Caleb's muscles tensed, his first instinct pure survival mode. Was this a setup? Some kind of scam? People didn't just hug strangers in parks at night. His heart hammered against his ribs as he tried to think, tried to figure out the angle. But then he felt the weight of her, the genuine trembling, the ice-cold touch of her skin through his thin jacket. This wasn't an act. Whatever was happening here, this woman really believed he was someone named Daniel. "Ma'am," Caleb said carefully, his voice rough from not speaking all day. "Ma'am, I think you got the wrong person." She pulled back just enough to look at his face, her weathered hands coming up to cup his cheeks. Her eyes searched his features with a desperate intensity, but there was something wrong with her gaze. It was unfocused, sliding past him and then back again, like she was seeing him through water. "Daniel, you're so cold, why are you out here, why didn't you come home?" "I'm not Daniel," Caleb said gently. "My name is Caleb, I don't know who Daniel is." But she wasn't listening, or maybe she couldn't hear him. She just kept holding his face, kept crying, kept looking at him like he was the most important person in the world. Caleb had seen this before. Near the end, before his mother died, she'd gotten confused like this. Would think Caleb was his father, or her own brother, or sometimes people Caleb had never heard of. The doctors had called it Alzheimer's disease. A slow theft of memory, of recognition, of self. "Ma'am, are you okay? Are you hurt?" The woman swayed on her feet, and Caleb caught her by the elbows to keep her upright. She was so light, so fragile, like a bird made of paper and glass, and she was freezing. Even colder than Caleb, which meant she'd been out here longer. "How do you know my name?" Caleb tried again, still half convinced this had to be some kind of trick. "Ma'am, how do you know who I am?" "Of course I know you," she murmured, her voice fading. "You're my boy, my Daniel, my sweet boy." Her knees buckled, and Caleb had to wrap his arms around her to keep her from falling. She leaned into him, her head resting against his chest, and he could feel how violently she was shaking. This was bad. This was really bad. Caleb looked around the empty park, at the snow falling heavier now, at the complete absence of any other people. No one was coming to help. No one even knew they were here. He should call 911. That was the smart thing to do, but Caleb didn't have a phone, hadn't been able to afford one in over a year, and leaving her here while he ran to find help felt wrong, dangerous. In her condition, in this cold, she might not have that kind of time. Okay, Caleb said, making a decision. Okay, let's get you sitting down. Come on, easy does it. He guided her to the bench, moving slowly so she wouldn't fall. She clung to him the whole way, trusting him completely with her weight, with her safety. Something about that trust made Caleb's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. He got her seated and crouched in front of her, looking up into her face. The street lamp cast harsh shadows under her eyes, making her look even more exhausted and lost than she probably was. "Ma'am, what's your name? Can you tell me your name?" She blinked at him, her lips moving soundlessly for a moment. Then with visible effort, she focused on his face. "Margaret," she whispered. "Margaret Reynolds." "Okay, Margaret, that's good. Do you know where you live? Can you tell me your address?" But she was already drifting again, her eyes losing focus. She reached out and touched Caleb's face with fingers that felt like ice. "You look so tired," she said. "Have you been working too hard again? I tell you not to work so hard." Caleb didn't correct her this time. He just took her freezing hands in his and tried to rub some warmth into them, tried to think of what to do next. He couldn't leave her here. That much was clear, but he couldn't carry her to safety either, not in his condition. He was already weak from hunger and exposure, already operating on the last reserves of his strength. And where would he even take her? He didn't know where she lived, didn't have a phone to call for help, didn't have any resources at all. But he also couldn't just sit here and watch her freeze to death. Margaret leaned into him, seeking his warmth, and Caleb made a choice. He sat down beside her on the bench and put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. It wasn't much, it wouldn't save either of them if they stayed here too long. But maybe it would buy them some time, keep her a little warmer while he figured out what to do. "It's okay," he said softly, not sure if he was talking to her or to himself. "We're going to figure this out, I promise." Margaret sighed and closed her eyes, and Caleb felt the full weight of her life settling into his hands. A stranger who thought he was her son. A woman who needed help he wasn't sure he could give, but he couldn't walk away. Despite everything, despite his own desperate situation, despite the voice in his head screaming that he needed to focus on his own survival, Caleb couldn't leave her alone in the cold. His mother's voice echoed in his memory, words she'd spoken in one of her last lucid moments before the Alzheimer's took her completely. "Baby, listen to me. The world is going to be hard on you, harder than it should be. And when it gets hard, you're going to want to become hard too, to protect yourself. But don't let it take your kindness. That's the only thing that really belongs to you, the only thing they can't take unless you give it away. As long as you have that, you're never truly empty." Caleb held Margaret Reynolds a little tighter and decided that tonight, at least, he'd hold on to his kindness, even if it killed him. The wind picked up, driving snow into their faces. Caleb pulled Margaret closer, trying to shield her with his body. She'd stopped shivering, which he knew was a bad sign. When your body gave up trying to warm itself, when it started shutting down non-essential functions to protect the core, that meant you were in serious trouble. "Margaret," Caleb said, patting her cheek gently, "Mrs. Reynolds, you need to stay awake. Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Richard," she murmured. "Who's Richard?" "My husband. He'll be so worried. We just had dinner. Where am I?" Her face crumpled with confusion and fear, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Caleb had seen this too with his mother, the way the present and past would blend together, creating a reality that only existed in the fractured landscape of a damaged mind. "You're in the park," Caleb said. "But we're going to get you home soon, I promise. Daniel should be home by now," Margaret said, her voice getting stronger for a moment. "He works too much. I tell him all the time, you work too much, you need to rest. But he doesn't listen. Never listens to his mother." She patted Caleb's hand with her frozen fingers, a maternal gesture that made his throat tight. "Are you hungry, sweetheart? You look so thin. Are you eating enough?" The question hit Caleb like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had asked him that? When was the last time anyone had looked at him with concern instead of suspicion or pity, or disgust? "I'm okay," he lied. "Don't worry about me. But Margaret was already fumbling with her purse, her numb fingers struggling with the clasp. After several attempts, she managed to get it open and pulled out a worn leather wallet. She opened it and removed all the cash inside, a thick fold of bills that Caleb couldn't make himself count, couldn't let himself think about. "Here," she said, pressing the money into his hands. "Take it, please Daniel, take it." Caleb stared down at the bills in his palm. In the dim light, he could see they were mostly 20s, maybe some 50s, enough money to buy a hot meal, maybe two, enough for a night in a cheap motel where he could sleep without fear of freezing or being robbed or worse, enough to change everything, at least for a little while. His stomach clenched with hunger so intense it was almost painful. His fingers, the ones that could still feel, curled around the bills automatically, his body making the decision before his mind could catch up. "I don't need it," Margaret continued, tears streaming down her face. "You need it more. Please baby, take it. Make your mother happy." Caleb looked at her face, at the desperate love there, the maternal instinct that even Alzheimer's couldn't completely erase. She thought he was her son. She thought she was taking care of her boy. And Caleb thought about his own mother, about the last time she'd been lucid enough to recognize him. She'd been in the hospital, dying slowly from the same disease that had already taken her mind. But she'd grabbed his hand with surprising strength and made him promise something. "Promise me you won't let the world make you cruel," she'd said. "Promise me that no matter how hard it gets, you'll keep your kindness. That's the only thing that makes you rich, baby. Not money, not success, kindness. If you still have that, you still have everything that matters." Caleb closed his eyes and felt the war raging inside him. He was starving, he was freezing. He was so tired of struggling, of surviving on scraps and charity and luck. This money could help him. This money could save him. But taking it would mean becoming someone else, someone his mother wouldn't recognize. Slowly, with hands that shook from more than just cold, Caleb opened Margaret's purse and put the money back inside her wallet. He tucked the wallet carefully into the purse and closed the clasp, then placed the purse in Margaret's lap. "No ma'am," he said quietly. "You keep that. I don't need it." Margaret stared at him, and something shifted in her expression. The fog lifted, just for a heartbeat, and she looked at him with sudden startling clarity. She saw him. Not Daniel, him. "Caleb, what's your name?" she asked, her voice different now, stronger. "Caleb, Caleb right. Why are you here, Caleb? In this park, in the middle of the night, in the middle of winter?" The question was so direct, so unexpected, that Caleb found himself answering honestly. "I don't have anywhere else to go. No family." He shook his head. "My mom died a few years back, cancer first, then Alzheimer's. Toward the end she was like you, couldn't remember things, couldn't remember me sometimes. It was hard to watch." Margaret's cold hand found his and squeezed gently. "I'm so sorry, child. It's okay, at least she's not suffering anymore. And your father, never knew him. It was just me and my mom, and now it's just me. Where do you sleep?" Caleb gestured vaguely at the park around them. "Wherever I can, sometimes shelters if there's space, but usually not. Most places want ID, want proof of address, want things I don't have, so I sleep outside mostly. Under bridges, in parks, in doorways. You learn to make it work, but tonight you have nowhere." "Tonight I have this bench," Caleb said with a weak smile. "I've had worse spots." Margaret was quiet for a moment, studying his face with those suddenly clear eyes. Then she said something that made Caleb's chest tighten. "You could have taken that money. You were hungry enough to take it. I could see it in your face, in your eyes. You wanted to take it." "Yes ma'am. But you didn't." "No ma'am. Why not?" Caleb looked down at their joined hands, hers so pale and wrinkled, his so dark and young. "Because my mom taught me that kindness is the only thing I own that nobody can take away from me. She said that as long as I have that, I'm never really empty, never really poor, and she was right. That's all I have left of her now. Her lessons, her love, her belief that I could be better than my circumstances. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was the best person I ever knew." Margaret squeezed his hand again. She raised a good son. The fog was descending again. Caleb could see it. Margaret's eyes were losing focus, her grip on his hand loosening. She swayed slightly, and Caleb had to steady her. "Mrs. Reynolds." "Margaret, so tired," she mumbled. "So very tired." "I know, but you can't fall asleep. Not out here." "Margaret, Listen to me, you need to stay awake. But her eyes were already closing, her body going limp against his side. Caleb's heart began to race. This was it. This was the decision point. He could try to flag down a passing car, but no cars had passed in over an hour. He could leave her here and run for help, but she might not survive the time it took him to find a phone and get someone to come back. Or he could do the only thing that made sense, even though it might kill them both. Caleb stood up, his legs protesting after sitting in the cold for so long. He bent down and carefully lifted Margaret into his arms, then shifted her weight onto his back in a piggyback carry. Her arms draped loosely over his shoulders, her head lolling against his neck. "Hold on," he told her, even though he wasn't sure she could hear him anymore. "Just hold on, Mrs. Reynolds, we're going to get you help." The hospital was about 15 blocks away. Caleb had walked past it before, had even thought about going to the emergency room once, when he'd been sick with a fever that wouldn't break. But he'd been too afraid of the questions, too worried about being arrested for not having insurance or ID. But Margaret needed help now, and Caleb was the only person who could get her there. He started walking into the blizzard, carrying a woman he'd just met, risking his life for a stranger who'd mistaken him for her son. And with every step, he heard his mother's voice telling him that this was what it meant to be human. This was what it meant to be good, even if nobody ever knew, even if nobody ever cared, even if it cost him everything. The first block was the hardest. Caleb's legs were already weak from hunger and cold, and Margaret's weight, light as she was, felt like carrying a boulder. Every step was a negotiation with his body, a battle between what he knew he had to do, and what his failing muscles could actually accomplish. The snow had turned vicious, driven by wind that cut through his thin jacket like it wasn't even there. Ice formed on his eyelashes, making it hard to see. His feet, already numb, slipped on the icy sidewalk with every other step. He fell to one knee in the second block, caught himself with one hand while keeping Margaret secure with the other, forced himself back up. "Stay with me," he muttered, not sure if he was talking to Margaret or to himself. "Just stay with me." Margaret stirred slightly on his back, her breath warm against his frozen neck. "Daniel?" "Yeah," Caleb gasped. "Yeah, it's Daniel. I'm here. I've got you." "Where are we going?" "Getting you help. Just hold on. I'm scared." "I know, me too, but we're going to make it." By the fourth block, Caleb's vision was starting to blur. The edges of the world seemed to pulse and fade, like someone was turning the lights up and down. His breathing had become labored, each inhale burning in his lungs, each exhale a cloud of white that was immediately torn away by the wind. He stumbled again, this time going down on both knees. Pain shot through his legs, but he barely felt it. Everything was distant now, muffled, like he was watching himself from somewhere far away. "Get up," he told himself. "Come on, get up." His body didn't want to obey. It wanted to stay down, to rest, to give in to the cold that was no longer uncomfortable but almost pleasant now, almost warm. That was the dangerous part. That was how people died in the snow. They stopped hurting and started feeling peaceful, and then they just never got up again. Caleb thought about his mother, thought about the promise he'd made her, thought about Margaret Reynolds trusting him with her life because her broken mind had decided he was her son. He got up. Sixth block, seventh block, each one an eternity, each step a victory. Caleb's mind was starting to play tricks on him, showing him things that weren't there. He saw his mother standing on a corner, smiling at him, telling him to keep going. He saw warm lights that turned out to be just reflections in ice. He saw the hospital entrance a dozen times, only to blink and find he was still blocks away. "Almost there," he said, his voice barely a whisper now. "Almost there, Mrs. Reynolds." Margaret had gone silent on his back, her weight dead and heavy. Caleb couldn't tell if she was unconscious or worse, and he couldn't let himself think about it. He just had to keep moving, just had to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Eighth block, ninth block, his legs were going to give out. Caleb could feel it, could feel the way his muscles were beginning to fail, the way each step was becoming more of a controlled fall than actual walking. He was running on nothing now, on fumes, on pure stubborn will, but it wasn't enough. In the 10th block, his knee buckled completely, and this time he couldn't catch himself. He went down hard, twisting at the last second to take the impact on his shoulder instead of letting Margaret hit the ground. Pain exploded through his body, but he kept his arms locked around her legs, kept her safe even as he lay there in the snow, unable to move. "Help," he tried to call out, but his voice was gone. "Please, somebody help us." No one answered. The street was empty, the world reduced to nothing but wind and snow and darkness. Caleb tried to push himself up, but his arms wouldn't support his weight anymore. He tried again, managed to get to his knees, then collapsed once more. Margaret slid partially off his back, and he scrambled to keep hold of her, to keep her head out of the snow. This was it. This was as far as he could go. He'd tried, he'd given everything he had, but it wasn't an "I'm sorry," he whispered to Margaret, to his mother, to whoever might be listening. "I'm so sorry." And then he saw them. Lights, real lights, not a hallucination this time. Bright lights cutting through the snow, growing larger, getting closer. A car was coming down the street, moving slowly through the storm. Caleb raised one arm, waving weakly. "Help," he croaked. "Please help." The car slowed, stopped, a door opened. Caleb heard shouting, heard running footsteps crunching through the snow. "Mom! Oh my God, Mom!" Strong hands were on him, rolling him over, checking Margaret. A man's face, wild with fear and relief, looked down at him. "Who are you? What happened?" Caleb tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The world was spinning now, tilting sideways, turning dark around the edges. "Hospital," he managed to whisper. "She needs hospital. We're going right now, both of you." Caleb felt himself being lifted, felt Margaret being taken from his arms. He tried to hold on to her, to make sure she was okay, but his body had nothing left to give. "It's okay," the man's voice said from somewhere far away. "I've got her. I've got both of you. You saved her. Do you understand me? You saved my mother's life." Caleb felt himself being loaded into a car, felt warmth beginning to seep into his frozen body. And then he felt nothing at all, as consciousness finally, mercifully slipped away. Daniel Reynolds had been in meetings all evening, his phone silenced, his mind focused on quarterly projections and market analysis. It wasn't until he'd walked out of the conference room after 9 p.m. that he saw the missed calls, 12 of them, all from his mother's home number. His stomach had dropped like a stone. Something was wrong. The voicemail from his mother's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, confirmed his worst fears. "Daniel, it's Patricia. Your mother walked out about an hour ago. She was confused, said she needed to find someone. I tried to stop her, but she got past me. I've called the police. Please call me back." Patricia, the caregiver he'd hired 6 months ago, the woman he'd trusted to watch his mother while he built his career, climbed the corporate ladder, made the money that paid for the big house, and the medical care, and all the things he thought mattered. Daniel had left work immediately, calling Patricia back as he ran to his car. "Where is she? Have they found her?" "Not yet. The police are looking." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Reynolds. I only looked away for a minute." Daniel's hands shook as he started the car. Outside, a blizzard was raging. His mother, who couldn't remember what year it was half the time, was out there somewhere in that storm. He drove slowly through his mother's neighborhood, peering through the snow at every shape, every shadow. He checked the grocery store she used to walk to, the park where she liked to feed birds, the church she'd attended for 40 years. Nothing. "Please," he whispered to the empty car, to God, to anyone who might be listening. "Please let her be okay." He expanded his search, driving in wider circles, calling out the window when he saw anyone on the streets. Other drivers honked at him for going too slow, for stopping in the middle of the road, but Daniel didn't care. Nothing mattered except finding his mother. It was nearly midnight when he saw them. At first it was just a shape in his headlights, a person, hunched over moving slowly through the snow. Daniel's heart leaped, but as he got closer, he realized it wasn't just one person. Someone was carrying someone else on their back. Daniel leaned forward, squinting through the windshield, and his breath caught in his throat. The clothing, the white hair visible even through the snow, the way the person being carried held themselves, that distinctive slump of his mother's shoulders. "Mom." He slammed the car into park and threw open his door, running through the snow without feeling the cold, without feeling anything except the desperate need to reach her. The young man carrying his mother turned at Daniel's shout. He was black, maybe early 20s, thin to the point of gaunt. His face was drawn with exhaustion and pain, his eyes hollow and barely focused. As Daniel watched, the young man's legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees, then forward, twisting at the last second to protect Daniel's mother from the fall. "Mom!" Daniel dropped beside them, his hands going to his mother's face. Her skin was ice cold, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow, but she was alive. She was alive. "Who are you?" Daniel demanded, looking at the young man who was now lying in the snow, barely conscious. "What happened? What did you do?" The young man's eyes struggled to focus on Daniel's face. His lips moved, and Daniel had to lean close to hear the words. "Hospital. She needs hospital. What happened to her? Where did you find her?" "Park. She was lost, confused, too cold. Had to get her help." The young man's eyes were closing, his body going limp. Daniel looked between him and his mother, his mind racing. This kid had been carrying his mother through a blizzard, carrying her toward help. He'd been saving her. "Okay," Daniel said, making a decision. "Okay, I'm getting you both to the hospital. Right now." He lifted his mother as gently as he could, carrying her to his car and laying her across the back seat. Then he ran back for the young man, who was trying and failing to get up. "Come on," Daniel said, putting his arm around the kid's shoulders and helping him stand. "I've got you." "She okay?" the young man mumbled. "She's going to be, thanks to you." Daniel got him into the front passenger seat, then ran around to the driver's side. The hospital was only 3 blocks away. 3 blocks that felt like 300 as Daniel navigated the icy roads, constantly glancing at his mother in the rearview mirror. At the young man slumped against the passenger window. "Stay with me," Daniel said. "Both of you just stay with me." He pulled up to the emergency entrance and laid on the horn. Medical staff came running out, and Daniel was shouting before they even reached the car. "Hypothermia. Both of them. My mother has Alzheimer's. She was lost in the storm." The next minutes were controlled chaos. His mother being lifted onto a gurney, wheeled away under bright lights. The young man being helped out of the car, supported by 2 nurses as his legs gave out again. He carried her. Daniel told the doctor who appeared at his side. "I don't know how far, but he carried my mother through that storm to get her help." The doctor looked at the young man with new respect. "We'll take care of him. Both of them are in good hands now." Daniel watched them wheel the young man away, watched him disappear through the emergency room doors. And then, alone in the bright lights of the ambulance bay, Daniel Reynolds broke down and cried. A stranger had saved his mother's life. A kid who looked like he'd been living on the streets, who'd been out in that storm himself with nowhere to go, had carried his confused elderly mother toward safety even though it nearly killed him. Daniel had spent years telling himself that hiring good caregivers was enough. That writing checks and setting up systems was the same thing as being present. That his mother understood he was busy. That she knew he loved her even if he rarely visited. But tonight when it mattered most, he hadn't been there. A homeless kid had done what Daniel should have done. Had been the son Daniel should have been. "I'm sorry, Mom," Daniel whispered into the cold night air. "I'm so sorry." Inside alarms were going off, voices were calling urgently. Daniel ran toward the emergency room entrance, toward his mother, toward the young man who'd saved her life, and made a promise to himself. This was going to change. Everything was going to change. Starting right now. 3 hours later, Daniel sat in the hospital waiting room, his expensive suit rumpled, his hair a mess from running his hands through it repeatedly. A doctor had come out once to tell him that his mother was stable, warming slowly, responding well to treatment. But there was no word yet on the young man. Daniel didn't even know his name. Patricia, the caregiver, had arrived about an hour ago, full of apologies and explanations. Daniel had barely been able to look at her. His mother had walked out of her own home, confused and lost, and Patricia hadn't noticed for over an hour. Over an hour. Anything could have happened in that time. "Mr. Reynolds," a nurse called from the doorway. "You can see your mother now. She's awake." Daniel followed the nurse through a maze of hallways to a private room where his mother lay in a hospital bed, covered in heated blankets. Her eyes were open, clearer than they'd been in months, and she smiled when she saw him. "Daniel," she said softly, "what are you doing here?" "Mom." Daniel pulled a chair close to her bed and took her hand. "How are you feeling?" "Tired, confused." "What happened?" "You went for a walk, you got lost in the storm." Margaret's forehead creased with worry. "I did. I don't remember." "It's okay, you're safe now." That's all that matters. There was a young man, Margaret said slowly, her eyes distant as she tried to capture the memory. In the park. He was so cold. I thought he was you. He brought you here, Daniel said. He carried you through the snow to the hospital. Where is he? Is he all right? I don't know yet. Before Daniel could say more, Patricia appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with agitation. Mr. Reynolds, could I speak with you for a moment? Daniel stood reluctantly and stepped into the hallway. Patricia's expression was a mixture of concern and something else. Suspicion maybe. Or accusation. I checked Mrs. Reynolds' belongings, Patricia said, her voice low. There's money missing from her wallet. Daniel felt his stomach drop. What? She had over $200 this morning. I know because I helped her organize her purse yesterday. Now there's only $40 left. Are you sure? Positive. Mr. Reynolds, that young man was the only person with your mother tonight. He must have taken it. Daniel looked back through the doorway at his mother, who'd closed her eyes again. Then he thought about the young man who'd collapsed in the snow, who'd used his last reserves of strength to get Margaret to safety. We don't know that, Daniel said. Who else could it have been? He's homeless, Mr. Reynolds. Living on the streets. Your mother was confused, probably had no idea what was happening. It would have been easy for him to stop, Daniel said sharply. We're not making accusations without proof. But I said stop. Daniel pulled out his phone. I'm calling my attorney. We're going to pull security footage from the hospital, from any cameras near the park, anywhere we can find. If that young man stole from my mother, we'll know. But if he didn't, I want to know who did. Patricia's face went pale. I really don't think that's necessary. I do. In fact, I think we should pull footage from my mother's house too, just to be thorough. Mr. Reynolds, how long have you been working for me, Patricia? 6 months, 7. And in those 7 months has my mother mentioned losing money before? Patricia hesitated just a fraction too long. Well, sometimes with her condition she forgets where she puts things. That wasn't my question. Has she mentioned losing money? I believe she mentioned it once or twice. But with Alzheimer's, you can't always trust. Daniel's eyes narrowed. I want a full audit. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every penny that's gone through my mother's accounts since you started working for us. Mr. Reynolds, I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Money is missing and you're very eager to blame someone who risked his life to save my mother. That makes me suspicious. Down the hall, a door opened and a doctor emerged. Daniel recognized him as the one who'd taken the young man inside. Excuse me, Daniel called out. The young man who came in with my mother, how is he? The doctor walked over. He's stable now. Severe hypothermia, malnutrition, dehydration, complete physical exhaustion. We're warming him slowly and getting fluids into him. He'll survive, but it was close. Another hour out in that cold, and we'd be having a different conversation. Can I see him? He's sleeping, but yes, just for a few minutes. Daniel followed the doctor to a room down the hall. The young man lay in a hospital bed, covered in thermal blankets. Medical equipment beeped softly around him, tracking his slow return from the edge. He looked even younger asleep, his face smooth and unguarded. Daniel realized he couldn't be more than 21, 22 maybe. Just a kid who'd nearly died saving a stranger. Do you know his name? Daniel asked. Caleb Wright. That's all we got from him before he passed out. Caleb Wright. Daniel repeated the name silently, committing it to memory. The remarkable thing, the doctor continued, is that he asked us to help your mother first, even though he was in worse shape, even though he could barely speak. That was his only concern. Getting her taken care of. Daniel felt his throat tighten. This kid, this stranger who had nothing, had put Margaret's welfare above his own. And Patricia wanted to accuse him of theft. Thank you, Daniel said, for taking care of both of them. Back in the hallway, Patricia was waiting, her expression anxious. Mr. Reynolds, about the money, we're done talking about the money, until we have proof. Daniel said. Go home, Patricia, I'll call you when I need you. But Mrs. Reynolds will need, I'll take care of my mother. That's my job, not yours. Patricia opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She left without another word, her footsteps quick and sharp on the linoleum floor. Daniel went back to his mother's room and sat down in the chair beside her bed. She was asleep again, breathing peacefully under the warm blankets. He took her hand and held it gently, feeling the fragile bones beneath papery skin. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I let this happen." His phone buzzed with a text from his attorney. Security footage was being collected. They'd have answers within 24 hours. Daniel suspected he already knew what those answers would be. The way Patricia had tried to deflect, to avoid the audit, to blame Caleb so quickly. The pieces fit together in an ugly picture. But he'd wait for proof, he'd do this right, and then he'd make sure that Caleb Wright, who'd saved his mother's life, got the apology and the gratitude he deserved. The security footage arrived at 8 a.m. the next morning, delivered by Daniel's attorney, along with a detailed analysis. Daniel watched it alone in a private consultation room the hospital had provided, his jaw tightening with every frame. There was footage from the park, grainy but clear enough. It showed Margaret wandering into the frame, confused and cold. Then Caleb, sitting on a bench, hunched and miserable. Margaret approaching him, embracing him. The two of them sitting together, and then the crucial moment, Margaret opening her purse, pulling out money, pressing it into Caleb's hands. The footage quality wasn't good enough to see facial expressions, but Daniel could see Caleb's body language. The way he held the money for a long moment, the way his shoulders slumped, the way he carefully put it back into Margaret's purse. He'd been telling the truth, he'd refused the money. The second set of footage was from Daniel's mother's house, from security cameras Daniel had forgotten he'd even installed. This footage was much clearer, and much more damning. It showed Patricia, over multiple days, opening Margaret's purse when his mother was sleeping or confused, taking bills from her wallet, not large amounts at once, just a 20 here, a 50 there. Careful theft, spread out over time. Easy to blame on confusion, on misplacement, on an elderly woman's failing memory. Daniel felt sick. He'd trusted this woman with his mother's care, had paid her generously, given her access to his mother's home, his mother's belongings, his mother's life, and she'd been stealing. Not just money, she'd been stealing trust, stealing dignity, stealing the safety his mother deserved. And when she'd been caught, when the missing money had been discovered, she'd tried to frame Caleb. A kid who'd nearly died saving Margaret, a kid who'd had every reason to take that money, and had chosen not to. Daniel's phone rang. It was the hospital. "Mr. Reynolds, Caleb Wright is awake. He's asking about your mother." "I'll be right there." Daniel found Caleb sitting up in bed, looking small and lost in a hospital gown that was too big for him. His eyes were clearer than they'd been last night, but there were shadows under them that spoke of more than just one night of hardship. "Mr. Reynolds," Caleb said when Daniel entered. "Is she okay, your mom?" "She's fine, thanks to you." Daniel pulled up a chair. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck, but I'm okay." Caleb paused. "Look, about the hospital bills. Don't worry about that. I'm taking care of it. I can't let you do that. I don't want charity. It's not charity. You saved my mother's life. This is the least I can do." Caleb looked down at his hands. "The woman who was here yesterday, the caregiver. She said I stole money from your mom." "I know, she was wrong, was she?" Caleb's voice was bitter. "I mean that's what everyone thinks, right? Homeless black kid with an elderly white woman, of course he stole from her." "I don't think that," Daniel said firmly. "And I have proof that you didn't." He pulled out his phone and showed Caleb the park footage. Showed him taking the money, considering it, and putting it back. "You told the truth," Daniel said. "My mother tried to give you money, and you refused it. Even though you were starving and freezing, even though you needed it desperately, you put it back." Caleb stared at the screen, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Patricia was the one stealing," Daniel continued. "She'd been taking money from my mother for months, small amounts, carefully hidden. And when the missing money was discovered last night, she tried to frame you to cover her own tracks. What's going to happen to her? She's been fired, and depending on whether my mother wants to press charges, she may face criminal prosecution. Your mom probably won't even remember," Caleb said sadly. "The theft I mean, probably not, but I remember, and I owe you an apology." Daniel leaned forward. "I should have trusted you immediately. Instead, I let someone make accusations based on assumptions, based on prejudice. That was wrong. It's okay, I'm used to it. That doesn't make it okay. Daniel took a breath. Caleb, the doctors told me you asked them to help my mother first. Even though you were in worse shape, you were more worried about her. She needed help more than I did. No, you were both in critical condition, but you put her first anyway. Daniel shook his head. Why? You didn't know her. She was just a confused old woman who mistook you for her son. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. My mom had Alzheimer's. Near the end, she'd forget who I was sometimes. Would call me by other names, think I was someone else. It used to hurt, but then I realized she wasn't seeing a stranger when she looked at me. She was seeing someone she loved, someone who made her feel safe. He looked up at Daniel. Your mom looked at me, and saw her son, saw someone who would protect her, someone who wouldn't let her down. I couldn't just walk away from that. Even if she'd never remember, even if no one ever knew, I had to try to be the person she thought I was. Daniel felt his eyes burning. This kid, who had nothing, who'd been abandoned by a system that should have protected him, still had more compassion and integrity than most people Daniel knew. Caleb, Daniel said carefully, when you're discharged from here, where are you going to go? Caleb's expression shuddered, becoming carefully neutral. I'll figure something out. I always do. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Daniel made a decision, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because it was right. Because this young man deserved better than the hand life had dealt him. I have a proposition for you, Daniel said, and I want you to really listen before you say no. Caleb looked wary but nodded. Come stay at my house. There's a guest house on the property, completely separate. It's yours for as long as you need it. No strings, no obligations, just a safe place to sleep, and regular meals while you figure out what comes next. I'm not finished. I'll also help you get your documents sorted out. ID, social security card, whatever you need. And if you're interested, I can connect you with educational programs, job training, whatever you want to pursue. Why would you do all that? Caleb asked, his voice strained. You don't know me. I know you saved my mother's life. I know you returned money you desperately needed. I know you have more character in your little finger than most people have in their entire body. Daniel leaned forward. But more than that, I need to do this. Not for you, for me. I don't understand. I almost lost my mother last night. And you know why? Because I thought hiring someone to take care of her was the same as actually taking care of her. I thought money could replace presence, that paying for the best was the same as being there. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. I was wrong. I delegated my responsibility as a son. I let work and ambition and 1,000 other excuses keep me from being there when she needed me. And a stranger, someone who had every reason to walk away, did what I should have done. That's not. Please, let me finish. If I let you walk back out onto those streets, if I let you go back to sleeping in parks and wondering where your next meal is coming from, then everything I've said about being grateful is meaningless. Don't you see? I can't save my mother from Alzheimer's. I can't fix what's happening to her. But I can help you. I can make sure that the person who saved her life gets the chance he deserves. Caleb was crying now, tears streaming down his face. I don't want to be someone's charity case, he said. I don't want to be pitied. I don't pity you. Daniel said firmly. I respect you. There's a difference. Pity is looking down on someone. Respect is recognizing their worth. And Caleb, you have worth. So much worth. You just need someone to help you see it. What if I mess up? What if this doesn't work? Then we figure it out together. But you have to at least try. You can't give up on yourself just because life has been unfair. Caleb wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. My mom used to say that kindness was all I had, that as long as I kept that, I'd never really be empty. Your mother was wise, and she'd want you to accept help when it's offered with genuine care. Okay, Caleb whispered. Okay, I'll try. Good. Daniel stood up and extended his hand. Thank you, Caleb, for everything. Caleb took his hand, and for the first time since Daniel had met him he smiled. It was a small smile, tentative and scared, but it was real, and it was a beginning. The guest house was nicer than anywhere Caleb had ever lived, including his childhood home. It had a real bed with clean sheets and soft pillows, a bathroom with hot water that never ran out, a kitchen with a refrigerator that was stocked with actual food. It felt surreal, like something that couldn't possibly be real, that would disappear the moment he truly believed in it. Daniel had driven him there after his discharge from the hospital, had given him the keys, had shown him how everything worked. The main house is about 50 yards away, Daniel had said, pointing through the window. That's where my mother and I live. You're welcome to come over any time, but this space is yours. Private, you don't have to ask permission or check in, just live. Caleb had nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. That had been 3 days ago. 3 days of waking up warm, of eating real meals, of taking hot showers that lasted as long as he wanted. 3 days of feeling like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. He still moved quietly through the house, still jumped at unexpected sounds, still ate portions that were too small out of habit and fear. He kept his few belongings packed in his backpack by the door, ready to grab and run if this turned out to be temporary. If someone decided he didn't belong here after all. On the 4th day, Daniel knocked on his door. Hey, you settling in okay? Yeah, thank you. It's amazing. Good. Listen, I wanted to let you know that I'm taking some time off work. I need to focus on my mother, spend more time with her. Is she okay? Physically, yes. The doctors say she recovered well from the hypothermia, but the Alzheimer's is still there, still progressing. And I realized something that night in the hospital. I've been so focused on her physical care, on making sure she had the best doctors and the best medications, that I forgot about the other part. The being there part. Daniel looked out the window toward the main house. She won't remember most of it, won't remember our conversations or the time we spend together. But I'll remember. And that has to be enough. It is enough, Caleb said quietly. My mom didn't remember me at the end, but I was there anyway, and I'm glad I was. Would you like to meet her? Officially, I mean, when she's having a good day. I'd like that. 2 days later, Daniel brought Caleb to the main house. Margaret was sitting in the sunroom, looking at a photo album. She looked up when they entered, and her face broke into a smile. Daniel, you brought a friend. Mom, this is Caleb, right? He's the young man who helped you that night in the park. Margaret studied Caleb's face, and something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or just a sense of familiarity. I remember you, she said. You were so cold, I gave you my coat. She hadn't given him her coat, she'd tried to give him money. But Caleb understood that memories could shift and blur, especially with Alzheimer's. You did, Caleb said gently. You were very kind. Would you like some tea? I was just about to make tea. That would be nice. And that became the pattern. Caleb would visit the main house most afternoons, would sit with Margaret in the sunroom, or the garden, would listen to her stories that repeated and changed, and sometimes made no sense at all. He never corrected her, never pointed out inconsistencies. He just listened. On good days, Margaret was sharp and present, asking Caleb about his life, encouraging him to pursue his education, telling him about her own youth. On bad days, she'd call him Daniel, or Richard, or sometimes names Caleb didn't recognize. But she was always happy to see him, always smiled when he walked in. You're good with her, Daniel said one evening after Caleb had spent 2 hours helping Margaret organize photographs. Patient, kind. That's not easy when someone has Alzheimer's. I learned with my mom. You can't fight it, can't try to force them into reality. You just have to meet them where they are. How long was your mother sick? About 3 years from diagnosis to the end. The last year was the hardest. She didn't know me anymore, would sometimes get scared of me. But I stayed anyway, because she was still my mom, even if she didn't remember being my mom. Daniel was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry you went through that alone. I wasn't alone. I had her, and that was enough. As weeks passed, Caleb slowly began to relax. He started eating normal portions, started unpacking his backpack and putting his few clothes in drawers, started to believe, just a little bit, that maybe this was real, that maybe he could stay. Daniel kept his promises. He helped Caleb get a new ID and social security card, helped him enroll in GED classes at the local community college. He never made Caleb feel like a project or a charity case. He just treated him like a person who deserved help. One evening, Daniel and Caleb were both in the main house, sitting with Margaret as she dozed in her favorite chair. The sun was setting, painting the room in gold and amber light. "Thank you," Caleb said quietly. "For what?" "For this. For believing in me. For not giving up. I should be thanking you. You saved my mother's life, and you saved mine." Daniel looked at him. "We saved each other, I think. You taught me what really matters. Not money or success or any of that. Just being there. Just staying. My mom used to say that family is the people who don't leave." "Your mother was right," Daniel said. "And Caleb, you're family now, for as long as you want to be." Caleb felt tears prick his eyes but smiled through them. "I'd like that." The months passed in a rhythm of quiet routines and small victories. Caleb passed his GED with scores high enough to qualify for college scholarships. He gained weight, his gaunt frame filling out with regular meals and the absence of constant stress. The shadows under his eyes faded, replaced by a clarity and peace he hadn't felt in years. But Margaret's condition continued its slow, inevitable decline. There were still good days, moments of startling clarity when she'd look at Caleb and really see him, would thank him for his kindness, would squeeze his hand with surprising strength. But those moments came less and less frequently, replaced by longer stretches of confusion and distance. Daniel hired a proper caregiver, carefully vetted this time, but he never delegated again. He was there for every doctor's appointment, every meal, every moment his mother needed him. He'd cut back his work hours to almost nothing, focusing instead on being present. "I used to think success meant building an empire," Daniel told Caleb one evening as they prepared dinner together. "Making partner, growing the business, accumulating wealth, but watching my mother fade, seeing how little time we actually have, it changed my perspective." "What matters now?" Caleb asked. "This, being here. Making sure the people I love know they're loved while they can still understand it." Caleb had started volunteering at a local homeless shelter, using his own experiences to connect with people living on the streets. He knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be judged, to be dismissed as worthless, and he knew what it meant when someone saw you as human, as worthy of care and dignity. "You're going to do important work," Margaret told him during one of her lucid moments. They were sitting in the garden, Caleb reading to her from one of her favorite books. "You have kindness in you. Real kindness, that's rare. You helped me see that," Caleb said. "That night in the park, even though you were confused, you treated me like I mattered." "You do matter." Margaret took his hand. "Don't ever forget that. You matter." Winter came again, bringing snow that reminded Caleb of that night a year ago. He stood at the window of his guest house, watching the flakes fall, remembering how close he'd come to dying in the cold. How close they both had come. Everything had changed that night. Everything. Daniel found him there, brought him a cup of hot chocolate without being asked. "Thinking about last year?" Daniel asked. "Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been a year. Sometimes it feels like it happened yesterday. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." "You've come a long way, we both have." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the snow blanket the world in white. "My mother's doctor says we're approaching the final stage," Daniel said quietly. "She's declining faster now. Probably has a few months, maybe less." "I'm sorry." "Me too, but I'm also grateful. Grateful I got this time with her. Grateful she's not in pain. Grateful you were there that night to make sure I didn't lose her before I had a chance to really be her son again." Margaret passed away on a quiet morning in early spring. She simply didn't wake up, slipping away peacefully in her sleep. The doctor said it was the best way, that she hadn't suffered. The funeral was small and intimate. Caleb spoke, telling the story of how Margaret had found him in the park, had mistaken him for her son, had treated him with love and acceptance even in her confusion. "She saved me," Caleb said to the small gathering. "Just as much as I saved her, maybe more. She reminded me that I was worth saving, that I deserved kindness and care. And that changed everything." After the funeral, Daniel and Caleb sat in the empty house, surrounded by Margaret's things, her photographs, her life. "What happens now?" Caleb asked. "Now we figure out how to honor her memory," Daniel said. "How to make her life mean something beyond just our grief." The idea came to Daniel in the middle of the night, 3 weeks after his mother's funeral. He'd been lying awake, thinking about Caleb's story, about all the other young people out there who were one bad break away from homelessness, who had no safety net, no support system, no one who believed in them. The next morning, he called Caleb to the main house. "I want to start a foundation," Daniel said. "The Margaret Reynolds Foundation, to help young people experiencing homelessness, ages 18 to 24, the ones who age out of foster care or lose their families and have nowhere to turn." "That's a beautiful idea. But I can't do it alone. I need someone who understands what these kids are going through, who can connect with them in a way I never could." Daniel looked at Caleb. "I need you." "Me, Daniel. I don't have any qualifications. I barely finished high school." "You have the most important qualification. You've been there. You know what it's like to sleep in the cold, to not know where your next meal is coming from, to be treated like you're invisible, and you know what it takes to accept help, to trust someone when trust feels impossible." Caleb was quiet, considering, what would I do? Outreach, building relationships with kids on the streets, being the bridge between them and the services we provide, housing, education, job training, mental health support, all of it. But none of that matters if they don't trust us enough to walk through the door. You can make them trust us. Because I've been where they are. Exactly. Caleb thought about the night in the park, about Margaret's kindness, about Daniel's faith in him, about all the ways his life had changed because someone had chosen to stay, to care, to believe. "Okay," he said. "Yes, I'll help you build it." They worked tirelessly over the next months, Daniel handling the legal and financial aspects while Caleb helped design the programs, drawing from his own experiences to identify what would actually help versus what just sounded good on paper. The foundation started small, one apartment building converted into transitional housing, one full-time counselor, one job training program. But it grew quickly as word spread, as young people found a place that treated them with dignity and respect, that saw potential instead of problems. Caleb was there for all of it. He met with every new participant, heard their stories, helped them navigate the systems designed to help but often felt designed to exclude. He knew the frustration of being asked for documents you didn't have, the shame of filling out forms that assumed you had things you'd never had. "You're making a real difference," Daniel told him 6 months in as they reviewed the foundation's progress. 70% of our participants are still housed after a year. 80% are in school or employed. Those are incredible numbers. It's not me, it's the program, it's what we're providing. It's you too. Don't sell yourself short. On the 1-year anniversary of Margaret's death, they held a memorial service at the foundation's office. Former participants spoke about how the organization had changed their lives, how it had given them hope when they had none. "Mrs. Reynolds never got to see this," one young woman said, tears streaming down her face. "But I think she'd be proud. This foundation is helping people the way she helped Caleb, by seeing them, by caring." After everyone left, Daniel and Caleb stood alone in the office, surrounded by photographs of Margaret, of the participants they'd helped, of the work still to be done. "She would be proud," Caleb said. "Of you, of this, of everything we're building in her name." "Of us," Daniel corrected. "This is both of our work, our family's work." "Family," Caleb repeated softly, testing the word. It had been so long since he'd had a family, since he'd belonged somewhere, to someone. "You're my brother," Daniel said. "Not by blood but by choice, by everything that matters." Caleb felt tears on his face but didn't try to hide them. "She'd like that. Your mom, she'd like knowing we became family." She already knew, even with Alzheimer's, even in her confusion, she knew the important things. She knew love when she saw it. 3 years after that night in the park, Caleb walked through the same space where he'd once sat freezing and alone. But this time, he wore a warm coat and carried a bag of supplies. This time, he was there with purpose. The Margaret Reynolds Foundation's outreach program visited this park twice a week, bringing food, warm clothes and information about services to people living on the streets. Caleb had insisted on this location specifically. It felt right, closing the circle, returning to where it all began. He spotted the young man on a bench near the back, hunched against the cold. 19, maybe 20, trying to be invisible. Caleb recognized that posture, that desperate attempt to take up no space, to draw no attention. "Hey," Caleb said, approaching slowly. "Cold night, you need anything? We've got hot food, warm clothes, information about housing. The young man looked up, his eyes wary and tired. Who are you? My name's Caleb Wright. I work with the Margaret Reynolds Foundation. We help people find housing, get back on their feet. I don't need help. Caleb heard the defensive pride in those words, remembered using the same tone himself. Okay, but if you change your mind, here's my card. We're available anytime, day or night. No judgment, no strings. Why do you even care? The young man asked. You don't know me. Why does it matter to you? Caleb sat down on the other end of the bench, keeping respectful distance, keeping it casual, because 3 years ago, I was sitting right here, same bench actually. I was hungry, freezing, had nowhere to go, and someone didn't walk away. Someone stayed. Someone saw me as a person worth saving. The young man was listening now, really listening. I'm not going to force anything on you, but I want you to know that you matter, that you deserve help. And that accepting help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. He stood up, pulled a warm jacket from his bag, and set it on the bench. Just in case you get cold. No pressure. As Caleb started to walk away, he heard the young man call after him. Caleb, he turned back. That person who stayed for you, what happened? Caleb smiled. They changed my life, helped me see that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose not to walk away. And if I called that number, you'd really answer. I'd really answer. Whenever you're ready. Caleb continued his rounds through the park, stopping to talk with other people, distributing supplies, building trust. His phone rang as he was finishing up. It was the young man from the bench. I'm ready, the voice said, scared but hopeful. I'm ready to try. Good, Caleb said, already heading back toward the bench. I'm coming to get you right now, and hey, you're going to be okay. I promise. He meant it, because he knew it was true, because someone had once made him the same promise, and they'd been right. Because kindness didn't end with one act. It multiplied, it spread, it came back around. As Caleb walked through the park, the same park where his life had changed 3 years ago, he thought about Margaret, about her confusion that night, how she'd mistaken him for her son, about how, in a way, she'd been right, because she'd given him a family, given him a home, given him a purpose, and now he got to pass that forward, one person at a time, one cold night at a time. The young man was waiting when Caleb got there, the jacket wrapped around his shoulders, his face a mixture of fear and hope. Come on, Caleb said gently, let's get you somewhere warm. As they walked together toward Caleb's car, toward warmth and safety, and a chance at something better, Caleb remembered his mother's words. As long as you keep your kindness, you're never truly empty. She'd been right. Kindness was the only thing that really mattered. Kindness was what saved lives. Kindness was what built families. And kindness was what kept the circle going, turning strangers into family, turning despair into hope, turning one cold night into a lifetime of changed lives. 5 years after that night in the park, Caleb stood at the podium in a crowded conference hall, looking out at hundreds of faces. Social workers, non-profit directors, city officials, people who dedicated their lives to helping others. And scattered throughout the audience, young people wearing name tags that read Margaret Reynolds Foundation participant. Daniel sat in the front row, pride evident in his smile. I want to tell you a story, Caleb began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. About a cold night, about a confused elderly woman, and about a choice that changed everything. He told them about sitting on that park bench, hungry and hopeless, about Margaret stumbling out of the darkness, calling him by her son's name, about the moment she'd pressed money into his hands, and the war that had raged inside him. I was starving, Caleb said. I hadn't eaten in over a day. I had nowhere to sleep, no money, no prospects. That cash in my hand could have bought me food, shelter, a chance to survive a little longer. Every logical part of my brain was screaming at me to take it. The room was completely silent, everyone leaning forward, but my mother had taught me something before she died. She told me that kindness was the only thing I truly owned, the only thing that couldn't be taken from me unless I gave it away. She said that as long as I had that, I was never really empty, never really poor. Caleb paused, remembering that moment, feeling again the weight of those bills in his palm. So I made a choice. I put the money back, and that choice, That one moment of choosing kindness over survival set off a chain of events I could never have imagined. Because when I returned that money, when I carried Margaret through the snow to safety, I wasn't just saving her life, I was saving mine too. He looked at Daniel, who nodded encouragingly. Here's what I've learned in the 5 years since that night. Kindness isn't weakness, asking for help isn't failure, and family isn't defined by blood or law, or any official document. Family is the people who choose to stay, the people who see you at your lowest and decide you're worth the effort anyway. A young woman in the third row was crying quietly. Caleb recognized her. She'd come to the foundation 2 years ago, 17 and pregnant, and terrified. Now she had her own apartment, a job and a healthy baby daughter. The Margaret Reynolds Foundation has helped over 800 young people in the past 5 years, Caleb continued. But we're not special, we're not doing anything revolutionary. We're just doing what Margaret did for me, that night in the park. We're seeing people, we're staying. We're refusing to give up on them, even when they've given up on themselves. He gripped the edges of the podium, leaning forward. Every single person in this room has the power to change someone's life. Not with grand gestures or huge amounts of money, though those things help, but with simple acts of human decency, with choosing to see the humanity in someone everyone else has deemed invisible, with staying when it would be easier to walk away. Caleb thought about all the nights he'd spent doing outreach, meeting people on cold benches and dark corners, people who looked at him with the same desperate suspicion he'd once carried. Some people ask me why I do this work, why I spend my evenings in parks and under bridges, talking to people most of society has written off, and the answer is simple: because someone did it for me, because Margaret Reynolds in her confusion treated me like I mattered, because Daniel Reynolds saw past what I was, and believed in what I could become. He could see people nodding throughout the audience, understanding dawning on their faces. But here's the real secret, the thing I wish everyone understood. When you help someone, when you really help them with genuine care and respect, you're not diminishing yourself, you're not losing anything. You're multiplying kindness, because the people you help, they go on to help others. The cycle continues, the circle expands. Caleb gestured to the young people scattered throughout the room. These folks right here, they're proof of that. They came to us broken and scared. We gave them safety, resources, and most importantly, belief. And now they're volunteers, mentors, advocates. They're out there right now, finding other people who need help, and they're staying, because someone stayed for them. A young man in the back stood up. Caleb recognized him as the kid from the park 3 years ago, the one who'd called that first night. Caleb taught me that accepting help doesn't make you weak, the young man said, his voice shaking but determined. It makes you brave, and now I get to teach that to someone else. The room erupted in applause, but Caleb raised his hand for quiet. This is the legacy Margaret Reynolds left behind. Not money, not buildings, not even the foundation itself. The legacy is this understanding that we're all connected, that we all have the power to save each other, if we just choose to care. He took a deep breath, feeling emotion rising in his throat. On that cold night 5 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd used up all my chances, exhausted all my options. I was ready to give up. But then a confused old woman called me by her son's name and hugged me like I was the most important person in the world, and everything changed. Caleb looked directly at the camera recording the speech, knowing this would be shared online, hoping his words would reach someone who needed to hear them. If you're watching this and you're struggling, if you're alone and scared, and think no one cares, I want you to know something. You matter, your life has value, and somewhere out there is your Margaret Reynolds, your person who will stay. You just have to hold on long enough to find them, or to let them find you. He paused, letting that sink in. And if you're watching this from a place of comfort and privilege, I have a different message. Look around, really look, see the people everyone else walks past. The homeless person on the corner, the struggling kid in your neighborhood, the coworker who's barely holding it together. You have the power to be someone's Margaret Reynolds. You have the power to stay. The silence in the room was profound, heavy with meaning. That's the message. That's what I want everyone to understand. Kindness isn't optional. It's not something we do when it's convenient, or when we'll get recognition. It's the fundamental choice that defines who we are as human beings. Do we walk away, or do we stay? Do we see people, or do we look through them? Do we care, or do we convince ourselves that someone else will handle it? Caleb stepped back from the podium, his voice softer now, but no less intense. Margaret Reynolds was sick, her mind was failing, she couldn't remember her own son's name half the time. But in her confusion, in her vulnerability, she did something extraordinary. She loved a stranger, she saw someone in need and responded with generosity and care. And that act of confused kindness saved 2 lives that night, mine and hers. He smiled, remembering Margaret's face, her gentle touch, her absolute certainty that he was someone worth loving. So that's what I'm asking all of you to do. Be confused if you have to. Make mistakes, get it wrong, but never ever stop caring. Never stop seeing people. Never stop believing that one act of kindness can change everything. Because it can. I'm living proof of that. Everyone in this room wearing a foundation name tag is living proof of that. Caleb looked at Daniel one more time, and they exchanged a look that said everything words couldn't. Family is the people who don't leave. Kindness is the only wealth that matters. And we all have the power to save each other, if we just choose to stay. He stepped away from the podium to thunderous applause, but Caleb barely heard it. He was thinking about Margaret, about his mother, about all the people who'd shown him that love wasn't about biology or obligation. It was about choice. The daily choice to care, to stay, to believe. Later that evening Caleb returned to the park. It had become a ritual for him, visiting on the anniversary of that night. He sat on the same bench where Margaret had found him, where his life had changed forever. His phone buzzed with messages, young people checking in, volunteers asking questions, Daniel sending a photo of their newest foundation building. But Caleb put the phone away, and just sat there, feeling the cold air, remembering. A figure approached out of the darkness. A teenage girl, maybe 16, looking lost and scared. "Are you Caleb Wright?" she asked. "I am. My friend told me to find you if I needed help. She said you'd understand, that you wouldn't judge." Caleb smiled and patted the bench beside him. "Sit down, tell me what's going on. And whatever it is we'll figure it out together, because that's what we do, we stay." As the girl began to talk, Caleb felt the circle completing itself once more. This was how kindness worked. This was how love multiplied. One person staying for another, who would stay for another, who would stay for another, on and on, creating a chain of care that stretched across time and circumstance. Margaret had found him in the darkness, and refused to let him disappear into it. And now Caleb spent his life doing the same for others, passing forward the gift he'd been given. The gift of being seen, the gift of being valued, the gift of someone choosing to stay. That was the message, that was the legacy, that was everything that mattered. Choose kindness, see people, stay. The rest would follow. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.